All right, here's a short tutorial showing you how to deconstruct news articles. First thing I want you to notice is that we've pre-filled these important terms. These are the things that you're going to need to know for your deconstruction. There's the text type, the author, the audience, the purpose, the content, the context, the message, the theme, and the mood, which is all things that you should be talking about and being able to analyze within the first paragraph in your introduction. We're going to talk more about that later. Tone, style, and structure, these parts right here, these are really important for your analysis in your body paragraphs. This is what you're going to see a lot of in the IB. The tone, the style, and the structure, that's kind of the meat and potatoes of your body paragraphs. So let's start with the easiest things first. What type of text is this? When you look at it, you can probably see that it looks like a newspaper article, right? There's some things that you might recognize, like the columns. You might recognize that there's a picture in here. You may see that there's larger print at the top. That's a headline. And if we zoom in even further, you can see here's the author. It's the author right there. For newspaper articles, it's important that you also recognize that sometimes they have contributing authors. If you look at the bottom, right here, let's back up. The bottom right-hand corner, Adam Goldman, Michael Emery contributed reporting. These are also authors, but the lead author is the one that has his name at the front. Let's spend some time focusing on this first part right here. So we have our headline, Russian prying known earlier, and then this is where the article was filed from, right? Where it was written, where the article takes place is in Washington, right? This is like a mini headline. Ex-officials said CIA told lawmakers last summer about election concerns. You might think that this is a pretty good summary. Another good place that you're going to find a summary is in the lead. Now, you might think that this is lead like line leader, like this. It's not, though. In newspapers, the lead is L-E-D-E. Quick story, the reason why it's this one and not this one is because when they make the newspapers on the machinery, there's a piece of metal that they call the lead. And this is also another way to spell lead. So to avoid confusion, they took this part, the lead of the article, and they spell it L-E-D-E. So inside the lead, you'll see there's really good information. This is the pyramid structure we were talking about when you looked at the definitions. This is the, if you think about the article starting from the most important stuff and then going down, here's the basic gist that you need to know. The CIA told senior lawmakers in classified briefings last summer that it had information indicating that Russia was working to help elect Donald J. Trump president, a finding that did not emerge publicly until after Mr. Trump's victory months later, former government officials say. So, quite simply, you can take, you can start filling in a lot of these points, right? So the text type is a news article. Later on, you're going to learn how to differentiate this between an opinion article. The author is Eric Lischblau, plus the people, plus these people down here. These are probably young reporters who are helping out and sort of they haven't made their chops yet. But this guy, Eric, he's been in the business long enough that he gets all the credit, right? Not all the credit. He gets the first line of credit. Okay. Who's the audience? Well, this is taken from the New York Times International Edition, which was published just last week. And The audience would be people who are interested in this story. They're interested in the story of elections maybe being tampered with. And so it's not just people in New York, it's not just Americans, it's not just people who voted for Trump or people who voted for Hillary. There's also a wider general audience of people who are, who are interested in knowing what happens with American politics. So the audience could be USA, interested in election, USA elections. Right? What's the purpose? The purpose of this article, you might think a couple different ways on it, right? The purpose of the article that I see is to share the information about this new revelation, right? There's new information, right? The new information is that, let's zoom in here. The new information is that Russia was working to help elect Donald Trump, and this did not emerge publicly until after the election. So the purpose is to shed new light on the story, right? There's new information about Russia and Trump. The content, this is the content right here. And then also this. That's the content. Context is a little bit more complicated. The context is what is happening that we need to know in order to better understand this article. So something that we should know about is that USA and Russia have a history, right? That includes a history that goes back to when Russia was the USSR. So there's a long history of CIA and KGB. Right? These are spy agencies. And the spy agencies, the national security apparatus of the different states are working to undermine the other, or sometimes to help each other, depending on the situation, but they're always trying to put the best interest of their country first, and sometimes it may be that, in this case, Russian foreign intelligence, and let's remember that the leader of Russia is Putin, who is a KGB guy himself. It may be that Russia was doing things to try to get Trump into office because that was in the best interest of Russian interests. That may have been a better choice for them. They may feel that, in which case they're going to do what they can to make that happen. Now, there's influence, and it's kind of like a gray area, right? And at some point you might cross over a line. Tampering with elections, a lot of people would consider that crossing over a line. So there's a context here of a long history of USA and Russia kind of working against each other, sometimes working together, but also working against each other. In the kind of another thing in the background here is that, there's what they called back in the day during the nuclear arms race in the Cold War. So there's Cold War tactics, and this is all related to what they call mutually assured destruction. And MAD, mutually assured destruction, is when they talk about having enough nuclear bombs that, if they were just fired at each other, then we would just blow each other up beyond what was even necessary, 2 or 3 times over. Okay, so on a lighter note, what's the message? The message here is that that Russian spies tampered with elections, right? The message is the thing that has the social, political, or moral importance, right? So if it was a political thing, then politics are being affected. There's the moral. Is it moral or is it immoral for them to do this, right? There's a question. And socially, if Donald Trump is the president, then that has social implications for not just the United States, but also the larger world. Theme is different from message. It's important to not get the two mixed up. Theme is different from message. Theme is universal, right? So there's a theme here of corruption. And maybe people cheating, right? Breaking the rules. Whatever those rules might be. Okay? So you see how corruption and cheating is a universal theme. It's something bigger than the specific, our politics may have been changed by Russia. So this is a specific, and this is a universal. This is bigger. All right? What is the mood? Well, when I read this, how do I feel? I feel a sense of kind of foreboding. I feel kind of it's troubling. It's also to me, it's a little disgust, right? I kind of feel a little bit of disgust from all this. I'm just kind of tired of all this type of stuff happening. It doesn't feel like people should be doing a better job. That's my mood. You might have a different one. So tone, structure, and style. I want you to take a look at the document that was shared on Google Classroom that talks about the different tone words. Tone and mood are different. It's important not to get them confused. So the tone that I see in this article, when I read something like the former official said in late August, 10 weeks before the election, John O'Brennan, then the CIA director, was so concerned about increasing evidence of Russia's election meddling, they began a series of urgent individual briefings for 8 top members of Congress. This, to me, it seems very candid. That doesn't sound very good. Seems candid, concerned, factual, objective, I think. It doesn't seem to work either. I think at some points I think it's direct. I think it's to the point. At some points it seems restrained, but I think there's also some tone shifts where it gets a little sharp. For instance, let's look at this paragraph here. I guess it starts on the bottom. I think this is a good place to show you where I think the tone starts to shift a little bit, right? The official said Mr. Brennan also indicated that unnamed advisors to Mr. Trump might be working with the Russians to interfere in the election. It seems pretty concise and direct. The FBI and 2 congressional committees are now investigating that claim, focusing on possible communications and financial dealings between Russian affiliates and a handful of former advisors to Mr. Trump. At this point, so far no proof of collusion has emerged publicly. It's starting to move towards something which I think is a little bit more critical, a little bit more sharp, a little bit more... I can start to see the bias of the writer come out a little bit. I think that the writer doesn't like Trump, and I can start to see that in here. I can almost hear like a little bit of like sarcasm or almost comedy. So far, no proof of collusion has emerged publicly. Now we go on. Mr. Trump has rejected any suggestion of a Russian connection as ridiculous, within quotes, and fake news, right? So they're quoting him directly and using this kind of absurd term. Ridiculous is kind of, it's kind of an absurd word, right? Fake news, this is what people say when they're caught in lies, and I think that he's quoting him directly here. I think they're quoting Trump directly here to kind of make fun of him a little bit, right? To like put him on the spot, to put him on the, on the ropes a little bit, right? They're getting a little more sharp. The White House has also sought to redirect the focus from the investigation and toward what Mr. Trump has said, with no evidence, was Barack Obama's wiretapping of phones in Trump Tower during the presidential campaign. So Yasmin Al-Jaber brought this up earlier, and I think it's really worth repeating. You could say this sentence without this appositive phrase here, with no evidence. And it doesn't really change the meaning of the sentence in a major way. The White House has also sought to redirect the focus from the investigation and toward what Mr. Trump has said was President Barack Obama's wiretapping of phones in Trump Tower during the presidential campaign. Mr. Trump has said, so we know that it's an allegation coming from, or an accusation coming from Mr. Trump. The with no evidence adds to it. Do you see how it adds to the tone? The White House has also sought to redirect the focus from the investigation and toward what Mr. Trump has said with no evidence was President Barack Obama's wiretapping of phones in Trump Tower during the presidential campaign. Now, it is possible the writer did not mean this. It is possible the writer was just trying to be more specific. For me, I am interpreting a little bit of a sharper tone right here. At this point right here. And recognizing that tone shift is a really good skill for you to develop. I think it's really important that you start to do that because that's indicating that the writing is moving in a direction, and when you can start seeing the movement of the writing, then you're really off. You have some good things to start analyzing. All right, so let's talk about the style. The style is the devices and the choices that are used to tell the story, to communicate the message. Now, style and structure are going to overlap a little bit. So the style here for the New York Times, you can see, let's look at. You can see that you have different text sizes. You have different fonts. You'll see that this up here is a serif font. Do you know what I mean by serif font? Serif has those little feet. And you'll see on the Washington part, it's sans serif, right? Sans serif. Sans serif means without the feet. That's a foot. It's a little serif. So that's a serif font. It's kind of you can talk about fonts as there's serif fonts and there's sans serif fonts. Okay, and then when you look at this, it's not Comic Sans, right? It's not a goofy kind of font. It's a pretty serious font. It looks like a newspaper, what you would expect of a newspaper. The 3 columns. There's the picture in the middle. The style of the writing is it's reporting facts. It's formal. You don't see contractions. The register is formal. It's conventional news. And it follows the New York Times style guide. So what I mean by that is that all newspapers have a style guide. A lot of different places have style guides. DAA might even have a style guide. It'd be interesting to look into that. Style guides are, we're gonna write things this way. We're gonna use these types of abbreviations. Or when we say CIA and FBI, we're going to do capital F dot no space B dot no space I dot comma, right? Whereas if in my class, you would know that I'd tell you to do something like this: F dot space B dot space I dot space, right? You would expect to see, if you're writing for me, you'd expect to see spaces here, right? You don't see the spaces here. That's an example of style, right? It's a choice that's made by the editorial staff. There's a lot more to talk about style as we get more familiar with these terms, and we can talk more about that. I want to talk about the structure because I think the structure is easier for you to understand. So what's the first thing you see when you look at this? Most of you are going to say it's the picture. Do you see how your eye is drawn in to the picture? We're attracted to faces. And what type of face is John Brennan making? John Brennan's the former CIA director. He looks like he's in trouble, right? He's got this frown. He's not a happy guy. You see these lines, right? The heavy brow. Here's an overweight, balding white dude who's unhappy, right? And he is literally at the center of the story. Structurally, you can see he is at the center of the story, right? Here's the story in these 3 columns, and he is literally at the center of the story. That's a decision. That's not a coincidence. That's not like this is the place where we thought that the picture would fit because we wanted to break between here and here. This is an intentional decision from the editorial staff. They're going to put the picture right here in the middle of the page so that you associate this guy, John Brennan, with Russians. Did he know? Was there a cover-up? That's the implication of this. All right. So look at the columns. Look at the picture. I want you to also look at the spacing. I want you to look at inside the paragraphs themselves. So let's see, how many sentences was the lead? It's one sentence. Next paragraph. How many sentences? There's a period. There's a period. So second paragraph is two sentences long. So what you see is we have 22 paragraphs. It's usually 1 to 3 sentences each. That's another example of the structure. So we'll do 22 paragraphs, 1 to 3 sentences each. I hope this helps you better deconstruct your news articles. And if you have any questions, of course, ask or email.